Today is the 24th Sunday in Ordinary Time. And in today's reading, Jesus shares a parable about the kingdom of heaven and likens it to a king who, when he's settling his debts, brings forward a man who owes him a large sum of money. And because the man can't repay it, he's going to put him in prison. He's going to sell him as a slave and his family and his kids. But the man falls down on his knees and begs forgiveness for the debt, promising that if he can, he will pay it off. So the king shows mercy and releases him. But instead of showing the same mercy, when this guy finds someone else who owes him a lot less money, he ends up throttling him and then sends him to prison. Well, the king finds out about this, and because of the fact that he had forgiven a huge debt to this man, but that man would not even forgive a smaller debt, he threw him in prison and said, "You will not be released until you pay the last penny." In that same way, all of us are expected to share that same forgiveness that we want to share with God. When we go forward for Holy Communion in the Mass, when we talk about what we eat the flesh and drink the blood of Christ, and that he comes and he resides in us, God comes to feed us, to instill in us his very virtues, who he is. And in a sense goes, he comes to instill charity in the heart, that we are to, it's to help feed us to keep us charitable. And when we go to the reconciliation, we confess our sins to the priest. And when we confess our sins, they are forgiven. But there is a component of reconciliation that requires a resolve to be better, to do better. God expects that in some way that we are truly penitent and don't want to commit these sins and are planning on going forward and not commit sin anymore. But say we go to reconciliation and we're holding things against other people. We're asking God for forgiveness, but we refuse to forgive those who are asking for us to forgive them. Not with certain certainty regarding any specific circumstance or person, but when we approach the confessional and we ask for forgiveness, doing so while holding on to this sin is not being completely and fully penitent. When we hold on to these sins, we don't confess everything, and two, we're not penitent for everything. But we are to be penitent, even if imperfectly. If we want to receive absolution, we have to be penitent. So if we're going to reconciliation and we're holding on to these sins and we're not penitent for these, we're not penitent. And as the penitent heart is one of the things that you must have for a valid confession, this can, depending upon the person, actually get in the way of our being able to receive this forgiveness and reconciliation, where it ends up making the sacrament in some cases invalid. If we end up invalidating our reconciliation because of the fact that we refuse to be penitent and we refuse to give up our hatred and our anger and our condescending attitude towards people, we can end up being in the same position as this man, who we have these great sins that we want forgiven so we can enjoy the glory of heaven with God. But if we're refusing to bestow the same grace on other people, we end up compromising ourselves. So when we go forward, we should try and be like the king that we are wanting to unite ourselves with after everything is said and done. Because heaven is not just a place. Heaven is unity with God. We don't want to be united with God in his love and in his mercy. God is not who we want. And if we reject God, God will respect our decision, and we could end up suffering the flames of hell for eternity, as the king did in this situation where he condemned the man and said, "You will not be released until you pay the last penny of what you owe." If what we owe is a debt to mortal sin that's unrepentant, then that could be what we end up suffering if we cannot forgive our brother from our heart.